The Monster Hunter series has always been full of life and character. From the monsters to the people we meet, there is much to love about the games, but one aspect that, in my opinion, is an aspect just as important as the series characters are the weapons. So I'm Darcblade with my guide to the bow in Monster Hunter Wilds. In this video we will go over the basics of the weapon, the unique mechanics, important combos and rotations, and finally the pros and cons. As always, if you enjoy these videos and want to see more from me, consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as it really does help more than I can express. Now, when talking about the moves and abilities, I will be listing them for all platforms, but I will be primarily talking about them utilizing the PlayStation controls, as that is my personal controller of choice whether I'm playing on PC or the PlayStation itself. The bow in Monster Hunter Wilds is a mobile ranged weapon, specialised at dealing fast arrow attacks at opponents. Whilst it is a ranged weapon, it does specialise more at dealing damage at medium and close distances, but nonetheless, you get a little bit of survivability as you don't have to be up close and personal with the monster. The bow is also one of the most manoeuvrable weapons in the game, with a highly effective and manoeuvrable dodge mechanic that allows you to easily reposition and avoid monster attacks. It's also a weapon that can make use of elements quite effectively, thanks to the fact that each arrow individually doesn't deal much damage, but the amount of damage you can deal out in rapid succession means the weapon benefits from elemental damage more than, say, if you were doing a single hard-hitting attack. The downside of all of this is the bow is a stamina-reliant weapon, meaning that your playstyle, as well as builds, will be focused around managing that yellow bar underneath your health bar, so you can effectively deal efficient damage, whilst at the same time not leaving yourself vulnerable to monster attacks. But let's get into the basic moves for the bow. First of all, as with all weapons, pressing triangle or Y will draw your weapon, after which pressing R2 or RT will allow you to fire said weapon. You can use the basic shot 3 times in a row, with each shot dealing more damage as they loose more arrows. Now, firing the weapon and loosing any arrow will consume a small amount of stamina, which is the main trade-off for dealing damage with the bow. Alternatively, you can simply hold down R2 or RT to charge up your shot. This can be charged up to 2 times. Each stage of the charge will allow the arrow to deal greater damage. There is much more to charging up your shots with the bow, but we'll talk about that in the mechanics section. You can also hold down L2 or LT to aim where the arrow is going to go. If you're in close range, you can also press circle or B to perform a quick shot. This can then be followed up by pressing circle or B again to perform a power shot, and then it can be followed up a 3rd time to perform a power volley. These are all horizontal shots that work great in close quarters, with each one being slightly more powerful than the last as they fire more arrows. Next up, by pressing triangle and circle, which is Y and B, you'll perform the Dragon Piercer. This is a fairly hard hitting move for the bow that will allow your arrow to pierce through an enemy, dealing damage along the way. This works better against monsters who have many hit zones than smaller monsters with fewer. It should be noted as well that the Dragon Piercer can be performed mid-combo, to which you'll perform the Dragon Piercer that doesn't take as long to charge up, allowing you to fire it off more quickly when comparing it to performing it on its own. Next up, with your weapon drawn, you can press triangle, and this will equip whatever coatings you have available to the bow you are using, indicated in the bottom right of the screen. The coatings give your arrows a wide range of properties, from allowing you to deal ailments to a monster to increasing your damage at certain distances. If you want to change what coatings you are using, you simply hold L1 or LB and then press triangle or Y or X and A to scroll up and down through the coatings available to you. Just highlight the one you want, release L1 and then press triangle or Y to equip it. Next up is the Thousand Dragons, which is done by holding R2 or RT and then pressing triangle and circle or Y and B. This will perform a hard hitting spread of arrows at opponents, better at close range than long range unless you're using the tracer round, to which we'll talk about that next. When charging up the arrow, so when you're pressing R2 or RT, follow up by pressing square or X and you'll load a tracer onto your current arrow. This can be then fired into a monster and it will stick there for a small duration of time. Afterwards, any arrow you fire at the monster will track automatically towards the tracer, assisting in your aim, giving you a little bit of an aimbot. Although this isn't always useful, sometimes the monster moves around a little bit too much for this to be effective, but it will allow your arrows to track the tracer, and after a certain amount of time, it will explode, dealing a little bit of extra damage to that monster. The next ability is the charge in sidestep, which is done by pressing a direction and X, or A, which will allow your hunter to dodge left, right, back and forward at the cost of stamina. This is your main evasion tool, as well as a good tool to allow you to reposition. You can also use this in between shots so you don't lose your current charge level, or better yet, if you perform the charge in sidestep at the right moment when a monster is about to hit you, it will instead turn it into the discerning dodge. This will give you an insane amount of invincibility frames, allowing you to avoid damage, but on top of that it will restore your stamina and your trick gauge, which is what is used to control your tracer arrows as well as your arrow coatings. It is by far the easiest way to get your stamina and your trick gauge back, but it obviously has a little bit of a risk-reward factor to it. Nonetheless, the invincibility frames are quite generous, so it's not the hardest mechanic to master. Additionally, if you press triangle or Y after a charge in sidestep, you'll perform another move called the flying swallow shot. That, whilst not practical, is kind of flashy and useful for when it comes to either repositioning your hunter or extending your dodge distance should the charge in sidestep not be far enough. You then have the arc shot, which is done by aiming the bow, so L2 or LT, followed up by charging the bow, which is R2 or RT, and then pressing circle and B. You can also hold B or circle to indicate where the arc shot is going to land. Once you're in a good position, you've charged up so the circle is as big as possible, you unleash the arc shot, to which afterwards arrows will rain down from the sky. Some of these will be called fuse arrows, similar to the tracer arrow, just slightly less effective. These will explode when another arrow hits them, or after a certain amount of time has passed. They will also deal additional stun damage should they be attached to a monster's head. Another move that isn't that useful is the jumping melee attack, which is performed without aiming your bow or charging it up. Just simply jump off of a ledge or the back of your sacred and press triangle. This will allow you to mount monsters, to which afterwards you can perform your normal light and heavy attacks with triangle and circle, as well as your draw finisher with R1 once you're ready to bring the monster down. Finally, there is the focus fire Hellstorm. This is your move to attack open wounds on a monster. They can also be used to target tracer arrows as well as fuse arrows, which is done by holding L2 or LT, so when you're aiming the bow, and then pressing R1. You can also hold the focus fire Hellstorm, to which each available target on the monster, whether it's through open wounds, the tracer arrow, or fuse arrows, will start to light up to 3 times. Each time increasing the amount of damage that the Hellstorm arrow will inflict on the monster. Be aware though, when it comes to open wounds, the Hellstorm arrow will slowly charge up 1 wound at a time rather than going for all of them at once. But moving away from the basics of the bow and talking about the unique mechanics, which is where some of the special aspects of these basic moves come into play. One of the first unique mechanics that you have to understand when it comes to the bow is charged shots, sometimes referred to as chaining shots together. As mentioned before in the basics, should you perform a charged shot, it will deal increased damage as you fire more arrows. But you can achieve this effect and have it applied to other attacks when you chain them all together. For example, as I mentioned before, should you perform 3 of your normal shots back to back, the final shot in the chain or combo will be firing as if you've performed a fully charged shot. You can then chain this into other attacks such as the power shot and the power volley, which will apply the increase of damage to those shots as well. You can keep the chain going by performing the charge sidestep, keeping the rotation going, and keeping your shots firing with that increased damage. Breaking the chain means that you have to start again, but sometimes this cannot be helped as you will run out of stamina or a monster will move, to which when this is the case, maybe it's time to invest in performing a Dragon Piercer or the Thousand Dragons move. The next mechanic you need to worry about is the trick arrow gauge, found in the bottom right of the screen above your item bar. This little blue bar dictates how many times you can apply coatings to your arrows as well as use the tracer. You'll see there's 3 markers on the trick arrow gauge, each indicating how much it costs to use a trick arrow or how many coatings you would get for applying them. Now you can restore this gauge by attacking a monster or simply holding down a charged shot. The next unique mechanic for the bow, well, to be honest, all ranged weapons, is understanding critical distance. When you target a monster, your aim reticule will change shape depending on if you're within critical distance or not. If there's a single circle, then you're outside of critical distance, and your shots will deal less damage. This sometimes happens when you get too close to an opponent too. You want to get into range where when you aim your bow, you'll have 2 circles on your aim reticule and it will be a slightly brighter orange colour. This means that your arrows will be dealing the most amount of damage they can possibly deal, and the ideal range for combat with your ranged weapon. There are some abilities and skills, as well as coatings in the case of the bow, that can change your critical range, so always keep this in mind. For example, the close range coatings allow you to get right up close to a monster and still maintain critical distance. Now, one special aspect I've touched on briefly whilst explaining the different moves for the bow is the fact that this bow is a stamina reliant weapon. Not all weapons in the game rely on stamina, but the bow utilizes it so heavily that you need to get used to watching the yellow bar, as well as using skills and items that can help increase its effectiveness. Every shot you perform, every dodge you perform will use stamina up, so using the right combo or series of moves is something you need to get used to. Not every bow has access to every coating, but if there is a coating you miss and really want, you can gain it via decorations. First of all, you have close range coatings, which increase your arrow damage but reduce your range slightly. However, they also eliminate the issue of critical range when you get up close to a monster. You then have power coatings, which is a straightforward simple damage boost to your arrows. You then have piercing coatings, which allow your arrows to pierce through a monster multiple times. You then have poison coatings, which allow you to potentially poison a monster. Paralysis coatings, which can potentially paralyze a monster, leaving them vulnerable. You can have sleep coatings that will allow you to put a monster to sleep. Blast coatings that allow you to potentially cause a blast blight buildup on the monster. And you have exhaust coatings, which can inflict stun damage as well as exhaust buildup, potentially exhausting monsters. But let's move away from the mechanics of the bow and talk about the useful combos. Now, one of the good things about Monster Hunter Wilds is that most weapons can combo moves into one another indefinitely. When it comes to the bow, its restriction is obviously the fact that it uses stamina, but there are 3 main combos that I tend to use. And these combos can in some respects be edited and changed slightly to your own personal playstyle. The first combo I refer to as the Dash Dance combo. This is a classic combo found in many Monster Hunter games that allow you to dash around the monster, dealing damage with your arrows in between. Now, there are many ways to achieve this, but ultimately at the end of the day, you want to get to a fully charged bow level, whether this is via simply holding down R2 and charging up the charge shot, or by utilizing the quick shot combo, which is pressing circle 3 times. Regardless of which way you achieve this, you perform a charging sidestep, to which you press R2 again to perform a fully charged shot, and then you go into circle to perform a power shot, and then circle again to perform a power volley, and then you go into the charging sidestep again, rinse and repeat until you're out of stamina. I would point out, when performing this combo, when you're about to run out of stamina, it could be advisable to go into the Dragon Piercer or Thousand Dragons, or better yet, Focus Fire Hellstorm move, if there's a wound. These will allow you to deal a little bit of extra burst damage at the end, and when it comes to the Hellstorm, this will actually allow you to recharge your stamina whilst you're charging up the move, thus allowing you to go back into the Dash Dance combo almost immediately afterwards. Obviously, you'll deal more damage with this combo if you're utilizing coatings and keeping that critical distance. The next combo is simply called the Dragon Piercer combo, which is simply done by firing a few arrows off and then immediately going into Dragon Piercer with triangle and circle to allow you to perform that faster mid-combo Dragon Piercer. This is good for raw attack builds, or if you're going up against large monsters with multiple hit zones. The next combo I call the Thousand Dragons combo, which is done by placing a tracer arrow on the monster, so whilst charging down your shot with R2, press square to apply a tracer arrow, fire it off into the monster, afterwards a power shot, then a power volley, then whilst holding R2, press triangle and circle to fire off the Thousand Dragons, which will track the tracer arrow, allowing you to deal a decent amount of burst damage. Now, of course, these are the basic combos that I use, and personally, you can change them here and there, edit a certain type of shot, or extend a combo as you see fit. The ultimate thing you want to remember though, always try to keep your bow charge at its highest possible level so you deal maximum damage. But let's move on to talk about the pros and cons for the bow. For me, the biggest pro for the bow is its damage output. So long as you have stamina, you're able to dish out a constant stream of damage against monsters, you're able to utilize elements quite effectively, and on top of that, you're able to do this at range. the next pro is the fact that the bow has great evasion capabilities. The invincibility frames you get when performing the discerning dodge are incredible and allow you to restore your trick arrow gauge as well as your stamina. On top of that, the charge and sidestep itself allows you to continue your assault against a monster, as it allows you to maintain your charge level or even just simply reposition. And then finally for the pros is the bow has access to utility options thanks to the various coatings it has available to it. Whether you want to paralyze a monster, poison a monster, put it to sleep, or just deal damage, there is coatings to help when it comes to utility. But there are cons, unfortunately. The biggest con for the bow is, unfortunately, it is a stamina reliant weapon, which means that everything you do with the bow will be dictated by how much stamina you have. This can be alleviated with various armor skills or certain items like dash juice, but nonetheless, it's something you have to get used to. And the final con is, unfortunately, the bow is a squishy weapon. Much like all ranged weapons, should you get hit with the bow, you're going to feel it. So always keep this in mind, keep your distance from a monster, and don't get too cocky with your discerning dodge. So there we have it, that is the bow summed up. I hope this video helps you on your journey to mastering the bow, but always remember, there are more ways to play each weapon in the game, so play how you want to. Every weapon can hunt every monster, and there are no wrong choices. But until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing my guide to the bow in Monster Hunter Wilds. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.